The sound of hoofbeats pounded against the dusty road as Gabriella Garrison clutched the reins tighter, her heart racing faster than the horse beneath her. Behind her, the darkening clouds of smoke rose from what had once been her family's homestead outside Truckee, California. It was 1873, and at 24, she had just lost everything except her life. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed in the distance as Gabriella pushed her mare harder, tears streaking down her soot-stained face. 3 years of drought had left the land parched, the perfect condition for the fire that had devoured her home while she'd been in town buying supplies. Her parents had been gone for 2 years now, taken by a fever that had swept through the mining town, but the ranch had been her anchor, the only home she'd ever known. As Truckee came into view, with its wooden buildings lining the main street, Gabriella slowed her horse. The town had grown considerably since the Transcontinental Railroad had come through 5 years earlier, transforming it from a small settlement to a bustling hub of activity. The station, hotel, and various businesses created a stark contrast to the wildness of the surrounding countryside. She dismounted outside the doctor's office, her legs trembling. Dr. Morrison had been treating her for months, and she needed to tell him what had happened. More than that, she needed a friendly face. "Miss Garrison, doctor." Morrison looked up from his desk as she entered, his spectacles sliding down his nose. "My word, what's happened to you?" "The ranch," she managed, her voice breaking. "It's gone. A fire." The elderly doctor guided her to a chair, his kind eyes full of concern. "I'm so terribly sorry, my dear." "Were you hurt?" She shook her head, brushing ash from her skirt. "No, I was here in town. Thank Providence for that small mercy." He poured her a glass of water. "What will you do now?" Gabriella stared at the floor. "I don't know." "You have your health, at least," he said gently. "Although I wish I had better news about your other condition." Her hand instinctively went to her abdomen. 3 months ago, after experiencing unusual pain, Dr. Morrison had examined her and delivered the devastating news. A childhood illness had left her with internal scarring that, in his professional opinion, meant she would never be able to bear children. "The tests I sent to San Francisco." She began. He shook his head. "The specialist confirms my diagnosis. I'm truly sorry, Gabriella." She nodded, swallowing hard. Since her parents' death, her dreams had centered around someday having a family of her own, children to love. Now, with both her home and that dream gone, she felt utterly adrift. "I still have some money saved," she said finally. "Maybe Mrs. Henderson would let me stay at the boarding house until I figure things out." "Actually," Dr. Morrison said, "I may have a better solution. The Isaacs Ranch outside of town is looking for a housekeeper. Zachariah Isaacs came in just yesterday asking if I knew anyone suitable." The Isaacs Ranch. Gabriella had heard of it, a substantial cattle operation north of town, but knew little about its owner. Zachariah inherited it about a year ago when his brother died. He's been running it alone since, but the place needs a woman's touch. He's offering room, board, and fair wages. Gabriella hesitated. Working as a housekeeper hadn't been in her plans, but she had few options now. "He's a good man," Dr. Morrison added. "Quiet, hardworking, keeps to himself mostly." "I suppose I could inquire," she said finally. "I'll write you a letter of introduction. You can take it out there tomorrow." The next morning, Gabriella rode her mare along the trail leading to the Isaacs Ranch. Her few remaining possessions were packed in saddlebags. She wore her best dress, a simple blue calico that had survived the fire, only because it had been hanging to dry at the time. The Isaacs property was larger than she'd imagined, with rolling pastures dotted with cattle. A substantial log house sat nestled against a stand of pines, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. As she approached, a tall figure emerged from the barn. Zachariah Isaacs was not what she had expected. Though his clothes were dusty from work, there was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself. His dark hair was longer than most men wore it, brushing his collar, and his face was tanned from days spent under the Nevada sun. He might have been 30, perhaps a few years older. Mr. Isaacs. She called, reining in her horse. He looked up, shading his eyes against the morning light. "Can I help you, madam?" Gabriella dismounted, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I'm Gabriella Garrison. Dr. Morrison said you were looking for a housekeeper." His expression remained impassive as he wiped his hands on a rag. "That's right. I'd like to apply for the position." She handed him the letter of introduction. He glanced at it before returning his gaze to her face. His eyes, she noticed, were a startling shade of blue against his weathered skin. "Dr. Morrison speaks highly of you," he said, his voice deep but soft. "But he doesn't mention why a woman who owned her own ranch would want to keep house for someone else." Gabriella swallowed. "My ranch burned down yesterday. I have nowhere else to go." Something flickered in his eyes, sympathy, perhaps, before he nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Isaacs. I can cook, clean, mend. I kept my parents' house after they passed." He studied her for a long moment. "The job's yours if you want it, Miss Garrison. It's not fancy work, but it's honest." "Thank you," she said, relief washing over her. "When would you like me to start?" "No time like the present." He gestured toward the house. "I'll show you your room." As they walked, Gabriella noticed a slight limp in his gait. When he caught her looking, he offered a brief explanation. "Old war injury. Gettysburg." She nodded, understanding now why he seemed older than his years. Many men had come back from the war changed, carrying wounds both visible and hidden. The house was sturdy but neglected. Dust coated most surfaces, and dishes were stacked in the kitchen sink. It was clear a woman hadn't lived here in some time. "My brother's wife died before he did," Zachariah explained, as if reading her thoughts. "Neither of us had much inclination for housekeeping." He showed her to a small but pleasant bedroom at the back of the house. A window looked out over a kitchen garden gone wild with weeds and volunteer flowers. "I'll leave you to get settled," he said, stepping back toward the door. "There's a pump in the kitchen for water. I usually take supper at 6. After he left, Gabriella sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overcome. Just 2 days ago, she'd been independent, secure in her home if lonely. Now she was dependent on the goodwill of a stranger. She allowed herself a moment of tears before wiping her eyes resolutely. She would make the best of this situation. She had no other choice. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Gabriella had made considerable progress. The kitchen was clean. A stew was simmering on the stove, and she'd managed to bake a loaf of bread using supplies she found in the pantry. Zachariah entered the house precisely at 6, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. He paused, seemingly startled by the transformation of the kitchen. "Something smells good," he said, washing his hands at the basin she'd set out. "I hope you like beef stew," she replied, ladling the fragrant mixture into bowls. "There wasn't much in the way of fresh vegetables, but I found some dried ones that worked well enough." They ate mostly in silence. Zachariah wasn't one for idle conversation, it seemed, but he ate with appreciation, helping himself to a second serving. "This is the first proper meal I've had in months," he admitted finally. "Thank you. You're welcome. I'll need to go into town tomorrow for supplies if that's all right." He nodded. "Take the wagon. Make a list of whatever you need for the house." After dinner, he surprised her by helping clear the table. As they worked side by side, she felt a strange sense of ease despite the awkwardness of their situation. "You have any family, Mr. Isaacs?" she asked. "No, my parents died years ago. My brother Daniel was all I had left." His voice remained even, betraying little emotion. "You, the same, just me now," he nodded, understanding passing between them. "Well, Miss Garrison, I start work at dawn." I won't expect breakfast that early, but if you could have something ready around midday, I'd appreciate it. Of course. Good night, then. After he left, Gabriella finished cleaning up, then explored the rest of the house. Besides the kitchen and her room, there was a parlor with worn but good furniture, Zachariah's bedroom, and what must have been his brother's room, door firmly closed. The house spoke of past happiness and recent grief. In her room, Gabriella unpacked her meager belongings. Among them was a small wooden box containing the few pieces of jewelry her mother had left her and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. She placed it on the small dresser, finding comfort in their familiar faces. As she prepared for bed, she thought of her new employer. Zachariah Isaacs was an enigma, a man who seemed to carry the weight of more than just the ranch on his shoulders. There was a sadness about him that resonated with her own. The next few weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Gabriella would rise early to prepare food for the day, clean the house, and tend to the neglected garden. She had convinced Zachariah to purchase some chickens, which now provided fresh eggs. She took pride in transforming the dusty, neglected house into a home. Zachariah worked from dawn until dusk, managing the cattle, repairing fences, and handling all the endless tasks a ranch demanded. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but Gabriella noticed he began lingering longer at meals, sometimes even sharing stories of his day. One evening in late June, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in. Gabriella had just finished hanging laundry on the line when the first drops fell. Rushing to gather the wet clothes, she was surprised to find Zachariah beside her, helping. "Leave them," he said as lightning flashed overhead. "It's not safe out here." They hurried to the porch as rain began falling in earnest. Gabriella watched, dismayed, as her freshly washed linens were soaked anew. "I'm sorry about your laundry," Zachariah said, standing beside her. "It's just water," she replied. "At least it's not dirt." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. True enough. They stood in silence, watching the storm. Lightning illuminated the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes, followed by rumbling thunder. "I've always loved storms," Gabriella admitted. "My mother used to say they cleaned the air. My brother used to say they were God's way of getting our attention." She glanced at him, surprised by the personal revelation. "You miss him." It wasn't a question, but he nodded anyway. "Every day." "How did he die?" she asked softly. Zachariah was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Pneumonia, last winter. It took him quick. I'm sorry. His wife, Sarah, died the year before, childbirth." His voice grew even quieter. "The baby, too, a boy." Gabriella's heart ached at the thought. "That's terrible." "Daniel was never the same after. I think part of him wanted to follow her." The rain fell harder, drumming on the roof. In the intimacy created by the storm, Gabriella felt brave enough to ask, "Did you ever marry Mr. Isaacs?" He shook his head. "No. The war came, then years of drifting. By the time I came back here, it seemed too late." He glanced at her. "And you?" "No." She hesitated, then added, "I always thought I'd have a family someday, but she rarely spoke of her condition. It felt too private, too painful. But something about the moment about him made her continue. "I can't have children. An illness when I was young left me unable." Zachariah was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and she believed he truly was. The storm began to move off, the spaces between lightning and thunder growing longer. "I should get supper started," Gabriella said, suddenly self-conscious about how much she had revealed. "I need to check on the horses." Zachariah stepped off the porch into the lessening rain. He paused, turning back. "Miss Garrison?" "Yes, thank you for telling me about your situation. It can't have been easy." His understanding touched her. "Thank you for listening." That night, lying in bed listening to the last remnants of the storm, Gabriella realized something had shifted between them. In sharing their vulnerabilities, a connection had formed, tentative but real. The summer progressed, hot and dry. Gabriella settled fully into her role, expanding her duties to include tending the vegetable garden and caring for the chickens. The house had transformed under her care, becoming comfortable and welcoming. Zachariah, too, seemed to be changing. He talked more during meals, occasionally even laughed at something she said. The grimness that had marked his features when she first arrived had softened somewhat. One Sunday in August, as they returned from church in town, Zachariah surprised her by suggesting they picnic by the stream that ran through the eastern edge of the property. "It's a nice spot," he said, almost apologetically. "Cooler than the house will be today." Gabriella agreed readily. She packed the cold chicken and biscuits she'd prepared that morning, along with some early apples from the tree behind the house. The stream gurgled pleasantly over rocks, shaded by cottonwood trees. Zachariah spread a blanket on the grassy bank, and they settled down to eat. "This is lovely," Gabriella said, looking around at the wildflowers dotting the grass. "I didn't know this place was here." "Daniel and I used to fish here as boys," he replied. "Our father taught us." "You grew up on this ranch," he nodded. "Born and raised. When the war came, I enlisted. Daniel stayed to run things with Pa. After the war, I couldn't settle, so I headed west for a while. Worked on ranches in Texas, drove cattle up to Kansas." "What brought you back?" "Pa died. Daniel wrote asking for help. Then Sarah died and he needed me more." He picked up a stone, turning it in his fingers. "I should have come back sooner." "You're here now," she said gently. He looked at her then, his blue eyes searching her face. "Yes, I am." Something in his gaze made her heart quicken. She looked away, focusing on serving him another piece of chicken. "This is the best chicken I've ever had," he said, changing the subject. "It's just chicken," she laughed. "Not the way you make it." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the birds and the rushing water. "Would you tell me about your ranch?" he asked suddenly. "The one that burned." Gabriella was surprised by his interest, but began describing her family's homestead. As she talked, memories flooded back, her father teaching her to ride, her mother singing as she kneaded bread, the first calf she'd helped deliver. She hadn't realized how much she needed to speak of these things, to keep them alive through words. Zachariah listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When she finally fell silent, he said, "You loved that place." "I did. It wasn't grand, not like this ranch, but it was home." "This could be your home too," he said quietly. Her eyes met his, uncertain of his meaning. "What I mean is," he continued, seeming suddenly nervous, "you've made this place better since you came. I hope you'll stay, not just as a housekeeper." Before she could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Zachariah stood, frowning. "Were you expecting anyone?" she asked. "No." A rider appeared, one of the ranch hands, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Mr. Isaacs, there's trouble. Rustlers hit the north pasture. They've taken at least 20 head. Zachariah's expression hardened. "Get the men together. I'll be right there." He turned to Gabriella. "I'm sorry, I have to go." "Of course," she said, already gathering their things. "Be careful." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then nodded and mounted his horse, galloping away with the hand. Gabriella returned to the house alone, her thoughts in turmoil. What had Zachariah been about to say? Not just as a housekeeper. The words played in her mind as she put away the picnic things. It was well after midnight when she heard horses in the yard. She had waited up, worried about Zachariah and the men. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she went to the door. Several riders were dismounting, their figures silvered by moonlight. She searched for Zachariah among them, her heart clenching when she didn't immediately see him. Then he appeared, leading his horse toward the barn. She sagged with relief. When he finally entered the house, his face was etched with exhaustion. A cut above his eye had dried to a crusty line of blood. "You're hurt," she said, immediately fetching water and a cloth. "It's nothing. Branch caught me." She insisted on cleaning the cut, her hands gentle against his weathered skin. He sat still under her ministrations, his eyes never leaving her face. "Did you find the rustlers?" she asked. "No. We tracked them to the county line but lost them in the dark. We recovered most of the cattle, though." "That's something, at least." When she finished, he caught her hand as she turned away. "Gabriella." It was the first time he had used her given name. "Yes, what I was trying to say earlier." He hesitated. "I'm not good with words." "Just say what you feel," she encouraged softly. "I care for you, more than I should, perhaps, as your employer, but I can't help it." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've been alone a long time. I didn't think I wanted anyone in my life again, but you've changed that." Gabriella's heart pounded. She had grown to care for him too, more than she'd admitted even to herself. "I care for you too, Zachariah," she whispered. Relief and joy flashed across his face. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and kissed her gently. It was a brief kiss, almost chaste, but it sent warmth spreading through her. When he pulled back, his eyes were questioning. "I should court you properly," he said. "If you'll allow it," she smiled. "I would like that very much." The courtship that followed was unlike any Gabriella had experienced before. Zachariah was old-fashioned in his approach, respectful and thoughtful. He brought her wildflowers, took her on rides across the ranch, and spent evenings reading aloud to her by the fire. Their relationship changed the atmosphere of the ranch. Zachariah smiled more often, laughed more freely. The hands noticed the difference, exchanging knowing glances when their boss went out of his way to spend time with the pretty housekeeper. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, Gabriella found herself falling deeply in love. Zachariah was quiet but steadfast, a man of integrity and gentle strength. When he held her hand or brushed a kiss against her cheek, she felt cherished in a way she never had before. Yet a shadow lingered in her heart. As their relationship deepened, the reality of her condition weighed more heavily. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she could no longer keep her fears inside. "Zachariah," she began hesitantly, "I need to talk to you about something important." He turned to her, concern in his eyes. "What is it?" "You know I can't have children." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I need to be sure you understand what that means if we were to. If our relationship continues to grow, you need to know there will never be a family." Zachariah was quiet for a moment. "Do you think that matters to me?" "It should. A man wants sons to carry on his name, to inherit what he's built." He took her hands in his. "Gabriella, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I love you, not for what you can give me, but for who you are. I've seen men with a dozen children live lonely, empty lives, and I've seen childless couples filled with joy." His voice grew softer. "If God blesses us with children somehow, I'll be grateful. If not, having you as my wife would be blessing enough." Tears filled her eyes. "Do you really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object. "I was going to wait for a more romantic moment, but maybe now is perfect after all." In his palm lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Gabriella Garrison, will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up within her, pushing aside her doubts. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Zachariah Isaacs." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his kiss deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Truckee. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, attended by the ranch hands and a few friends from town. Dr. Morrison gave the bride away, beaming with fatherly pride. Gabriella wore a new dress of ivory silk, ordered specially from Sacramento. When she walked down the aisle toward Zachariah, The love shining in his eyes made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. Their first months of marriage were blissful. Gabriella moved into the master bedroom, which she had redecorated with fresh curtains and linens. Their days followed the rhythm of ranch life, but now with shared touches and glances that spoke of deeper connections in private moments. Winter settled over the Sierra Nevada, bringing snow and long evenings by the fire. Zachariah would read aloud while Gabriella sewed or mended, the simple domesticity a joy to both of them. Christmas came, their first as husband and wife. They decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, exchanged modest gifts, and hosted a dinner for the hands who had nowhere else to go. Watching Zachariah laugh with the men, Gabriella felt a fullness in her heart she had never expected to experience. Yet as January turned to February, an unexpected sadness crept over her. One evening, Zachariah found her crying quietly in the kitchen. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately at her side. She shook her head, embarrassed. "It's foolish. Not if it makes you cry. I was just thinking about what it would be like to have a child with you." She wiped her eyes. "Sometimes I forget for a little while that it's impossible, then it hits me all over again." Zachariah held her close, stroking her hair. "I'm sorry, my love, so sorry. I'm happy with you," she insisted. "Please believe that, it's just sometimes I wish." "I know," he kissed her forehead. "I wish I could change it for you." The moment passed, but Gabriella noticed Zachariah seemed preoccupied in the days that followed, often lost in thought. When she questioned him, he assured her everything was fine, just ranch business on his mind. March arrived with the first hints of spring, the snow beginning to melt in lower elevations. One morning, Zachariah announced he needed to ride into town on business. "Would you like to come?" he asked. "No, thank you," Gabriella replied. "I've got bread to bake and mending to finish." He kissed her goodbye, lingering a moment longer than usual. "I love you," he said with an intensity that surprised her. "I love you too." After he left, Gabriella went about her chores, humming to herself. Around midday, she heard hoofbeats in the yard. Thinking Zachariah had returned early, she went to the window, surprised to see not her husband but a woman she didn't recognize, riding alongside one of the hands. Curious, Gabriella went to the door. The woman was young, perhaps 20, with a worn look about her. She carried a bundle wrapped in a shawl. "Mrs. Isaacs," the hand called out. "This lady's asking for Mr. Isaacs, says it's important." "My husband is in town," Gabriella replied, stepping onto the porch. "I'm Mrs. Isaacs." "Can I help you?" The young woman dismounted awkwardly, still clutching her bundle. As she came closer, Gabriella realized what she carried was a baby. "My name is Mary Wilkins, madam," she said, her voice hesitant. "I'm looking for Zachariah Isaacs. As I said, he's not here right now." "What is this about, Miss Wilkins?" The woman shifted uncomfortably. "It's about this baby. His brother Daniel's baby." Gabriella felt the world tilt beneath her. "That's not possible. Daniel's baby died with his wife over a year ago." Mary shook her head. "No, madam. This is Daniel's child, sure enough, born just 3 months ago." She pulled back the shawl to reveal a tiny face, eyes closed in sleep. "His name is Thomas, after his grandfather." Gabriella's mind raced. "I don't understand. Daniel's wife died in childbirth." "Yes, madam, Sarah was his wife." "I was." Mary's cheeks flushed. "I was working at a place in Sacramento when Daniel would come to sell cattle. We became close. He told me he was a widower, which was true enough." The implication was clear. This young woman had been Daniel's mistress. "When I found out I was expecting, I wrote to him," Mary continued. "He sent money, said he'd take responsibility, but then he died before the baby came." Gabriella struggled to process this information. "Why have you come now? I tried to manage on my own, but I can't." Tears filled Mary's eyes. "I heard Mr. Isaacs was his brother. I thought maybe he'd want to know about his nephew." Before Gabriella could respond, The sound of a wagon approaching drew their attention. Zachariah was returning, his face registering shock as he saw the visitor. He climbed down quickly. "Mary, what are you doing here?" Gabriella stared at him. "You know her." Zachariah's expression was pained. "Yes, Daniel told me about her before he died." "You knew about the baby?" Gabriella asked, hurt creeping into her voice. "No," he said firmly. "I knew about Mary, but Daniel never mentioned a child." Mary stepped forward, unwrapping the baby further. "He's your nephew, Mr. Isaacs. Look at him." Zachariah approached slowly, his gaze fixed on the infant. As he looked down at the sleeping face, something changed in his expression. "He has Daniel's chin," he said softly. "And his eyes when they are open," Mary added. Gabriella watched the scene unfold, her emotions in turmoil. Part of her was hurt that Zachariah had kept Mary's existence from her. Another part was filled with unexpected yearning as she looked at the baby. "Why have you come?" Zachariah asked Mary. "I can't keep him," she said bluntly. "I need to work, and no decent place will hire a woman with a bastard child. I thought maybe you'd want him being your blood and all." Zachariah looked at Gabriella, his eyes questioning, almost pleading. "We should talk inside," Gabriella said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's too cold out here for the baby." Once inside, Mary told her story more fully. She had been working in a saloon in Sacramento when she met Daniel Isaacs. Their affair had lasted nearly a year, conducted whenever he came to the city. When she became pregnant, he had promised to provide for her and the child, though he never suggested marriage. "He sent money regular-like until he got sick," Mary explained, bouncing the now-awake baby on her knee. "After he died, I managed for a while, but it's too hard. I'm heading to San Francisco. There's work there, but not for a woman with a baby." "What exactly are you asking of us?" Gabriella questioned. Mary looked directly at her. "I want you to take Thomas. Raise him as your own. He deserves better than I can give him." Gabriella glanced at Zachariah, who had been unusually quiet. "This is quite sudden," she said carefully. "I understand that," Mary replied. "But he's got Isaac's blood. Shouldn't he be with family?" Zachariah finally spoke. "Could you give us a moment to discuss this privately?" Mary nodded, focusing her attention on the baby. In the kitchen, Gabriella turned to her husband. "You knew about her all along." "I knew Daniel had a woman in Sacramento," he admitted. "He told me before he died, asked me to check on her if anything happened to him, but he never said anything about a baby." "Did you check on her?" "I sent money, anonymously. I didn't want to get involved beyond that." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have told you, but it didn't seem important once we were married." Gabriella absorbed this, deciding to set aside her hurt for the moment. "What do you want to do about the baby?" Zachariah's eyes met hers, full of conflicting emotions. "He's my nephew. My blood, but this is a decision we need to make together. If we take him, it would change everything," she said quietly. "Yes, we would be parents, Zachariah, to a child that isn't ours by birth. He is mine by blood," he pointed out, "and could be yours by love." The words hit Gabriella like a physical force. A child, a baby to raise to love, something she had believed impossible. "You want this," she whispered. "Only if you do," he replied. "I won't bring him into our home if you're not fully willing." Gabriella closed her eyes, her heart racing. When she opened them again, her decision was made. "Let's meet our son," she said softly. Relief and joy transformed Zachariah's face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Are you sure?" Yes, and she was. Despite the shock and hurt, something deep within her had recognized this moment as a gift unexpected, unplanned but precious. They returned to Mary, who looked up expectantly. "We'll take him," Zachariah said firmly. Tears filled Mary's eyes. "You'll be good to him. Treat him right." "We'll love him as our own," Gabriella promised, surprising herself with how true the words felt. Mary nodded, seemingly satisfied. I wrote down when he was born and such. She handed Gabriella a folded paper. His full name is Thomas Daniel Isaacs. I gave him his father's name, thought it was right. It is right, Zachariah agreed. Would it be all right if I held him one last time? Mary asked, her voice breaking. Of course, Gabriella said gently. Mary cradled the baby close, whispering words too low to hear. Tears streamed down her face as she kissed his forehead. Then, with visible effort, she handed him to Gabriella. The weight of him in her arms was foreign yet somehow familiar. He looked up at her with curious eyes blue like his father's and uncle's. A tiny hand escaped the blanket, fingers flexing in the air. Without thinking, Gabriella offered her finger, which he grasped with surprising strength. "Hello, Thomas," she whispered. "I'm going to be your mother now." The baby made a small sound, almost like agreement. Gabriella looked up to find Zachariah watching them, his expression one of wonder and love. Mary stayed only long enough to explain Thomas's routine and needs. She refused Zachariah's offer of money, saying she had enough for her journey to San Francisco. When she left, her shoulders were straight, but Gabriella had seen the heartbreak in her eyes. "She loves him," she said to Zachariah after Mary had gone. "Yes," he agreed, "enough to give him up." The first days with Thomas were a whirlwind of adjustment. Neither Gabriella nor Zachariah had experience with infants, and they learned through trial and error. Nights were fragmented by Thomas's cries, days punctuated by feedings and diaper changes. Zachariah rearranged his work schedule to help as much as possible. Gabriella found herself moved by the tenderness with which this strong man handled his tiny nephew, the gentle way he spoke to him. Word spread quickly about the baby's arrival. Neighbors and townsfolk reacted with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Some accepted the story that Thomas was Daniel's legitimate child, brought to them after his mother's death. Others clearly suspected the truth, but were too polite to say so openly. Dr. Morrison, upon examining Thomas, smiled knowingly at Gabriella. "He appears to be a healthy, thriving baby," he said. "You seem to be adjusting well to motherhood." "It's overwhelming," she admitted, "but wonderful too." "Sometimes God works in unexpected ways," the doctor said. "This boy needed parents and you needed a child to love." As spring turned to summer, Thomas grew and changed. He began to smile, a gummy grin that melted Gabriella's heart every time. His eyes tracked her movements across the room, his little body wiggling with excitement when she approached. Zachariah was equally besotted. He would carry Thomas around the ranch in a sling Mary had left, proudly showing him the cattle and horses. In the evenings, he would rock him to sleep, singing old war songs in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. One night after Thomas had finally settled, Gabriella found Zachariah on the porch, staring at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, joining him. "I was thinking about Daniel." He put his arm around her, wondering if he knows his son is safe with us. "I believe he does." Zachariah looked at her. "Are you happy, Gabriella? With this life we've made?" She considered the question seriously. "I never expected any of this, losing my ranch, coming here, falling in love with you, becoming a mother. But yes, I'm happier than I ever thought possible." He kissed her then, a deep kiss full of promise and passion. When they separated, breathless, he said, "I never thought I'd have a family of my own. Now I have everything I could want." "Everything?" she teased. "Well," he smiled, "maybe a few more children someday." There are others who need homes, like Thomas. The idea of expanding their family, of giving Thomas siblings, filled Gabriella with unexpected joy. "I'd like that," she said softly. As the months passed, Thomas became firmly embedded in their lives and hearts. His first word was "Mama," spoken one morning as Gabriella dressed him. She had burst into tears, calling for Zachariah to come quickly. "Did you hear?" she asked excitedly. He called me Mama, Zechariah had smiled broadly. Smart boy, he knows who loves him. By Thomas's first birthday, no one could have guessed he wasn't born to them. He had Zechariah's serious expression when concentrating and, Gabriella liked to think, her own curiosity about everything. They celebrated with a small party, inviting neighbors and friends from town. As Thomas smashed his hands into the cake Gabriella had baked, squealing with delight, she caught Zechariah's eye across the room. The love and contentment she saw there mirrored her own feelings. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Thomas slept peacefully in his crib, Zechariah handed Gabriella a small box. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it and see." Inside was a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she found a tiny portrait of Thomas on one side. The other side was empty. "For our next child," Zechariah explained, "whenever he or she comes to us." Gabriella kissed him, overcome with emotion. "Thank you. It's perfect." Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it unexpected news. A letter arrived from Mary Wilkins, postmarked San Francisco. She was doing well, working as a seamstress for a respectable establishment. She didn't ask about Thomas directly, but enclosed a small hand-knitted sweater for the child. Gabriella wrote back, including a daguerreotype of Thomas and a detailed account of his development. It seemed only fair that his birth mother should know he was thriving. As Thomas approached 18 months, his personality blossomed. He was adventurous and stubborn, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. He toddled after Zechariah whenever possible, trying to imitate everything his father did. One crisp November morning, Gabriella was in town buying supplies when she overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. "Poor little foundling," an older woman was saying to her companion. "Taking in Daniel Isaac's bastard like that. Christian charity, I suppose, though why they pretend he's their own is beyond me." "Martha, keep your voice down," her friend hissed, noticing Gabriella nearby. The woman turned, her face reddening when she recognized Gabriella. "Mrs. Isaacs, I didn't see you there." Gabriella straightened her spine. "Clearly not, Mrs. Thornton." She stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "Thomas is our son in every way that matters. The circumstances of his birth are no one's concern but ours." Mrs. Thornton had the grace to look ashamed. "Of course, dear, I meant no offense." "I believe you did," Gabriella replied evenly, "but I forgive you as I hope others forgive your own mistakes." She completed her purchases with dignity and rode home, her mind troubled. While she had expected some gossip, hearing Thomas referred to as a foundling and bastard cut deeply. She feared what he might face as he grew older. When she told Zechariah about the incident, his jaw tightened. "People will always talk," he said, "but Thomas will know he's loved. That's what matters." "I want to adopt him legally," Gabriella decided. "Make it official that I'm his mother." "He already has my name," Zechariah pointed out. "Yes, but I want there to be no question about my status as his mother, if anything ever happened to you." She couldn't finish the thought. Zechariah nodded, understanding. "We'll talk to the lawyer in town next week." The legal process was straightforward since Thomas was Zechariah's blood relation. By Christmas, papers had been filed declaring Gabriella his legal mother. That Christmas was even more joyous than the last. Thomas was old enough now to be excited by the decorations and presents. Watching him rip paper off packages with gleeful abandon, Gabriella felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. As winter deepened, the household settled into comfortable routines. Thomas was sleeping through the night now, allowing Gabriella and Zechariah more time alone together. Their love had only grown stronger through the challenges and joys of parenthood. One evening in late January, as they sat by the fire after Thomas was asleep, Zechariah brought up something unexpected. "I've been thinking about Daniel's room," he said. "It's time to clear it out." The room had remained untouched since his brother's death. The door kept closed. "Are you sure?" Gabriella asked, knowing how difficult this would be for him. "Yes, it's time to let go of the past." He squeezed her hand. "I was thinking we could make it into a room for Thomas when he's older, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe a nursery first for another child." Gabriella's heart leapt. "Another child. I received a letter from the orphanage in Sacramento," he explained. "They have a baby girl just 2 months old. Her mother died in childbirth, no father in the picture. They asked if we might be interested." "Oh, Zachariah." Tears filled Gabriella's eyes. "A daughter." "Only if you want to," he said quickly. "I know Thomas keeps us busy enough." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I want her." His face lit up with joy. "I'll write back tomorrow. They'll need to check our home, make sure we're suitable. When could we get her?" "If all goes well, perhaps by spring." The prospect of expanding their family filled Gabriella with excitement. She had taken to motherhood with natural ease, discovering depths of love she hadn't known existed. The thought of a baby girl to join their son seemed perfect. February brought heavy snowstorms, isolating the ranch for days at a time. During one such storm, Thomas developed a worrying cough. By nightfall, he was burning with fever. Gabriella and Zachariah took turns sitting with him, applying cool compresses and trying to get him to drink. As his condition worsened, fear gripped them both. "We need to get the doctor," Zachariah said grimly, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "The roads are impassable," Gabriella replied, her voice tight with worry. "It's too dangerous. I can't just sit here and watch him suffer." Zachariah began pulling on his heaviest coat. "I'll take the strongest horse. I should be able to reach town by morning." Gabriella wanted to argue but knew he was right. Thomas's labored breathing terrified her. "Please be careful," was all she said. After Zachariah left, Gabriella continued tending to Thomas, praying fervently as she had never prayed before. The night stretched endlessly, each hour marked by the boy's rasping breaths and feverish whimpers. By dawn, Thomas seemed marginally better, his fever slightly reduced. Gabriella dozed in the chair beside his crib, awakening to the sound of voices in the yard. Relief flooded her when she heard Zachariah's deep tones, followed by Dr. Morrison's familiar voice. The men entered, stomping snow from their boots. "How is he?" Zachariah asked immediately. "A bit better, I think," Gabriella replied. "His fever's down some." Dr. Morrison moved to examine Thomas, his experienced hands gentle on the child's small body. After a thorough check, he straightened with a reassuring smile. "Pneumonia, but we've caught it early. He's young and strong." He opened his bag, removing medicines. "These will help, along with steam treatments and plenty of fluids." The next days were anxious ones, but Thomas gradually improved. His fever broke completely on the third day and his cough began to loosen. By the end of the week, he was sitting up, asking for more of everything offered. "He's going to be fine," Dr. Morrison assured them during his final visit. "Children are remarkably resilient." After the doctor left, Gabriella found Zachariah in Thomas's room, watching their son sleep peacefully. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "For going for the doctor, you may have saved his life." He turned, embracing her fully. "I was so afraid," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "The thought of losing him. I know." She pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "But we didn't lose him. He's still here with us." That night, holding each other close in bed, they spoke of their hopes and fears with new honesty. Thomas's illness had shaken them both, reminding them of life's fragility. "I never knew I could love someone so much it hurt," Zachariah confessed. "Not until you and Thomas." "Becoming a mother changed me," Gabriella responded, "in ways I never expected. It's opened my heart completely." March brought the first real thaw. the snow retreating to reveal muddy grounds and the first green shoots. With it came news from the orphanage in Sacramento. The home visit would take place in 2 weeks, and if all was satisfactory, they could bring their daughter home by May. Gabriella threw herself into preparations, cleaning and organizing with renewed energy. Thomas, now fully recovered, followed her about the house, helping in his enthusiastic toddler way. When the day of the home visit arrived, Gabriella was nervous despite Zachariah's reassurances. The representative from the orphanage, a stern-looking woman named Miss Abernathy, arrived precisely at 10. She inspected the house thoroughly, asking pointed questions about their finances, daily routines, and parenting philosophy. Thomas, unusually shy, clung to Gabriella's skirts. "You already have one child," Miss Abernathy noted, reviewing her papers, "and he came to you under irregular circumstances." "Thomas is our son," Zachariah said firmly. "The circumstances of his birth don't change that." The woman regarded them thoughtfully. "Why do you want another child?" "Because we have love to give," Gabriella answered honestly, "and a home to share. And you're prepared for the challenges of raising a girl who isn't biologically yours." "We're prepared to love her completely," Gabriella replied, "just as we love Thomas." Something in her sincerity must have convinced Miss Abernathy, whose expression softened slightly. "The child in question, whom we've been calling Jane, was abandoned at our doorstep. We know nothing of her parentage." "Her name will be Sarah," Zachariah said, glancing at Gabriella, who nodded in agreement. They had decided to name their daughter after Daniel's wife, a way of honoring his memory. "Sarah Isaacs," Gabriella added. "She'll be loved and cherished, I promise you that." Miss Abernathy made a few final notes. "Well, everything appears to be in order. Barring any unforeseen issues, you should be able to collect Sarah in 6 weeks' time." After she left, Gabriella and Zachariah embraced, joy and anticipation filling them both. Thomas, sensing their happiness, clapped his hands and demanded, "Up, up," until Zachariah swung him into the air, his laughter filling the room. The weeks leading to Sarah's arrival passed in a blur of activity. Gabriella prepared the nursery, washing and mending the baby things Thomas had outgrown. Zachariah built a new cradle, working late into the evenings to perfect every detail. They spoke to Thomas often about his coming sister, trying to prepare him for the change. Though he seemed to understand in his limited way, nodding solemnly when they explained baby sister, Gabriella worried about how he would adjust to sharing their attention. Finally, the day arrived. Zachariah and Gabriella traveled to Sacramento, leaving Thomas in the care of their most trusted hand's wife. The orphanage was a stark brick building near the edge of the growing city. Inside, the halls echoed with children's voices. Miss Abernathy met them, leading them to a small office where they completed the final paperwork. Then, with a rare smile, she left to fetch their daughter. The minutes she was gone seemed eternal. Gabriella clutched Zachariah's hand, her heart racing. When the door opened and Miss Abernathy returned with a small bundle, time seemed to stop. "Here she is," the woman said, carefully transferring the baby to Gabriella's waiting arms. "Your daughter." Sarah was smaller than Thomas had been, with a dusting of dark hair and solemn brown eyes that regarded Gabriella with what seemed like curiosity. Her tiny fists were balled up against her chest, her bow-shaped mouth working silently. "Hello, Sarah," Gabriella whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Zachariah's arm came around her shoulders, his other hand gently touching his daughter's cheek. "She's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The journey home was nerve-wracking, every jolt of the wagon making Gabriella clutch Sarah tighter. The baby remained remarkably calm, sleeping for most of the trip, waking only to cry for feeding. When they arrived home, Thomas was waiting impatiently on the porch with Mrs. Jenkins, the hand's wife. He ran to meet them, stopping short when he saw the bundle in Gabriella's arms. "Baby?" he asked, his eyes wide. "Yes, darling," Gabriella answered, kneeling carefully so he could see. "This is your sister, Sarah." Thomas peered at the baby with intense concentration. After a moment, he reached out one finger to touch her hand. When Sarah reflexively grasped it, his face broke into a delighted smile. "My baby," he declared. "That's right," Zachariah said, ruffling his son's hair. "Your sister." The adjustment to life with two children was challenging but joyful. Sarah proved to be an easier baby than Thomas had been, sleeping for longer stretches and rarely fussing. Thomas was fascinated by her, often sitting beside her cradle, reading to her from his picture books. By summer's end, the family had settled into new routines. Gabriella sometimes marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just 2 years. From lonely widow with a barren womb to wife and mother of two, her cup now overflowed with blessings. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah asleep in Gabriella's arms and Thomas playing with wooden blocks at their feet, Zachariah spoke of the future. "I've been thinking about expanding the ranch," he said. "Buying the Johnson property that adjoins ours to the east. It would give us better access to water, more grazing land for the cattle." "That sounds like a good idea," Gabriella replied. "Are the Johnsons willing to sell? Ben's getting older, wants to move to town. His sons aren't interested in ranching." Zachariah stretched his long legs. "It would be an investment in our future, in the children's future." The casual way he said it, our future, the children's future, filled Gabriella with contentment. They were building something lasting together, a legacy for Thomas and Sarah. "I think we should do it," she said. "This land has been good to us. It seems right to grow with it." Zachariah smiled, taking her free hand in his. "I was hoping you'd say that." As autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues, their family continued to thrive. Sarah began sitting up, her personality emerging as distinctly different from her brother's. Where Thomas was bold and energetic, Sarah was thoughtful and observant, taking in the world with quiet intensity. Thomas, now past his second birthday, was talking in simple sentences and developing a strong will that sometimes clashed with his parents' patience. Yet even in moments of frustration, Gabriella wouldn't have changed a thing about him. The purchase of the Johnson property went through in late October, nearly doubling the size of the Isaacs Ranch. With it came new responsibilities and plans for the future. "We'll need to hire more hands," Zachariah said as they walked the new property line one crisp morning. "Build another bunkhouse, maybe a second barn. And a bigger house eventually," Gabriella suggested. "The children will need their own rooms as they grow." He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Are you thinking beyond the two we have?" She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Perhaps. There are many children who need homes." His face softened with love. "I think our family has room to grow." Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling before Thanksgiving. The holiday was celebrated with a festive meal that included the ranch hands and several neighbors. Gabriella, watching her family and friends gathered around the table, felt a happiness so complete it brought tears to her eyes. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, she shared her thoughts with Zachariah as they sat by the fire. "I was just thinking about how lucky we are," she said, leaning against him. 2 years ago I thought my life was over, my home gone, no possibility of children. Now look at us." He kissed the top of her head. "It wasn't luck, it was God's plan." "Do you really believe that?" she asked. "I do." His voice was thoughtful. "I think about the chain of events that brought us together. If your ranch hadn't burned, if Daniel hadn't died, if Mary hadn't brought Thomas to us. So many things had to happen, some of them painful, to create this family." Gabriella considered this. "I wouldn't change any of it," she said finally. "Not even the hard parts. They led us here." As Christmas approached, Gabriella threw herself into preparations with joyful enthusiasm. This year, Thomas was old enough to understand the holiday, and she wanted to make it special for both children. She baked cookies shaped like stars and trees, hung garlands of pine and holly throughout the house, and sewed new stockings for everyone. Zachariah contributed by finding the perfect pine tree, which they decorated with paper ornaments and strings of cranberries. On Christmas Eve, they attended the service at the church in town. Thomas, dressed in his best clothes, sat between them, fidgeting but trying to be good. Sarah, now 8 months old, slept peacefully in Gabriella's arms, oblivious to the candlelight and singing. After the service, several townspeople approached to admire the children and exchange holiday greetings. Gabriella noticed with satisfaction that even Mrs. Thornton seemed charmed by Thomas's enthusiastic "Merry Christmas" and Sarah's sleepy smile. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Thomas woke them at first light, bouncing on their bed with excitement. "Presents! Presents!" he chanted until Zachariah groaned dramatically and swung him into the air. Sarah, disturbed by the commotion, began to cry from her cradle in the corner of the room. Gabriella lifted her, soothing her with gentle words. "Merry Christmas, my loves," she said, looking from her daughter to her son to her husband. The day was filled with simple pleasures, opening gifts: a wooden horse for Thomas, a soft doll for Sarah, enjoying a special breakfast, playing in the light dusting of new snow that had fallen overnight. In the afternoon, they bundled the children into the sleigh Zachariah had prepared and rode around the property, bells jingling merrily. That evening, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Zachariah handed Gabriella a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more gift," he said, smiling at her surprise. Inside was a book leather-bound and beautiful. Opening it, she found it was a journal, the first page inscribed with Zachariah's steady hand. "For Gabriella to record our family story, which is still being written. With all my love, Zachariah." The remaining pages were blank, waiting to be filled. "It's perfect," she whispered, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I thought you might want to write down the children's milestones, our family memories." He looked slightly self-conscious. "So we don't forget any of it." "I love you," she said simply, kissing him softly. "More than I can say." As the new year began, Gabriella started filling the journal with accounts of daily life: Sarah's first tooth, Thomas's growing vocabulary, the expansion of the ranch. She found joy in recording these seemingly mundane details, knowing they were building a history for their children. Spring arrived with its usual bustle of activity on the ranch. Calving season kept Zachariah busy day and night, while Gabriella managed the household and children. Thomas was now firmly in the why stage, questioning everything with inexhaustible curiosity. Sarah had begun crawling, exploring the house with determined focus. In May, as Sarah's first birthday approached, another letter arrived from Mary Wilkins. She was married now, she wrote to a shopkeeper in San Francisco. They were expecting their first child in the fall. She inquired about Thomas, expressing gratitude for the updates Gabriella had sent. "Would you mind if she visited someday?" Gabriella asked Zachariah that night. "To see Thomas." He considered the question carefully. "I don't think I would mind, but what would we tell Thomas? He's getting old enough to understand relationships." "The truth, eventually," Gabriella replied. "That Mary gave birth to him but couldn't keep him. That we're his parents in all the ways that matter." Zachariah nodded slowly. "Yes, the truth is best, but not yet. He's still too young." They agreed to invite Mary to visit after her baby was born, when Thomas was a bit older. In her reply to the letter, Gabriella included the invitation, along with a lock of Thomas's hair and a new photograph. Sarah's first birthday was celebrated with a small party, just family and a few close friends. Unlike Thomas, who had exuberantly destroyed his cake, Sarah approached hers with methodical curiosity, carefully tasting before deciding it met her approval. "She's so different from him," Gabriella remarked to Zachariah as they watched her. "It's fascinating." "She reminds me of you," he replied. "Thoughtful, deliberate. And Thomas is all you determined and bold." "God help us when they're teenagers," Zachariah laughed. As summer progressed, the ranch flourished under their care. The expanded property allowed for a larger herd, which meant better profits. They hired 2 additional hands and began planning the construction of a new, larger house on a rise overlooking the valley. Gabriella's days were full from dawn to dusk, but she wouldn't have changed a moment. The joy of watching Thomas and Sarah grow and develop, the satisfaction of partnering with Zachariah in building their ranch, the peace of knowing this was where she belonged, all combined to create a contentment she had never imagined possible. One warm evening in July, as they sat on the porch after putting the children to bed, Zachariah brought up something unexpected. "I received a letter from the orphanage in Sacramento again," he said, his tone casual. Gabriella looked at him curiously. "Oh." "They have twin boys, just turned a year old. Parents killed in a stage robbery." She caught her breath. "Twins. Brothers should stay together if possible," he continued, "but finding a home willing to take both." "Zachariah Isaacs," Gabriella said, turning to face him fully. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" He smiled, a mix of sheepishness and hope. 4 children isn't too many, is it? Not for a ranch this size. 4 children under the age of 3. She tried to sound scandalized, but couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. "We'd be outnumbered." "We're already outnumbered," he pointed out. "What's 2 more?" Gabriella laughed, shaking her head in wonder. "You're serious about this?" "I am." His expression grew more earnest. "I keep thinking about how different our lives would be if we hadn't taken Thomas, if we hadn't adopted Sarah. Every child deserves what we can give them: a home, a family, love." Tears pricked at Gabriella's eyes. This man, who had once been so solitary and reserved, now opened his heart and home without hesitation. Her love for him in that moment was overwhelming. "Yes," she said simply. "Let's bring those boys home." The twins, whom they named James and Joseph, arrived in September, just as the aspen trees were turning gold. They were identical in appearance, round-faced with curly brown hair and serious eyes, but Gabriella quickly learned to tell them apart by their personalities. James was the leader, Joseph the thinker. Thomas, now a self-important big brother, took his role seriously, showing the twins his favorite toys and places around the ranch. Sarah was initially wary of the newcomers but gradually warmed to them, especially enjoying their delight in her games of peekaboo. Life with 4 children under 3 years old was chaotic, exhausting, and wonderfully fulfilling. Gabriella hired a young girl from town to help with the housework, allowing her to focus more on the children. Zachariah adjusted his work schedule to be home more, often taking Thomas with him on shorter rides around the property. The new house progressed slowly but steadily through the fall. It would be twice the size of their current home, with separate bedrooms for each child, a larger kitchen, and even a dedicated playroom. Gabriella sometimes found it hard to believe how far they had come in just 3 years. One crisp October morning, as Gabriella was hanging laundry while the twins napped and Sarah played nearby, she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Visitors were unusual on weekdays, and Zachariah was out with the herd, taking Thomas along for what the boy called a big boy ride. As the wagon came into view, Gabriella saw it was Dr. Morrison, his medical bag beside him on the seat. Concern immediately flooded her. "Doctor, is everything all right? Are Zachariah and Thomas?" "They're fine, my dear," he assured her, climbing down. "I was out this way checking on the Hendersons' new baby and thought I'd stop by. Those twins giving you any trouble?" "No more than expected," she replied, relieved. "They're thriving, just as you said they would." The doctor followed her into the house, where she offered him coffee and freshly baked bread. As they talked, he observed her with professional interest. "You look tired, Gabriella," he said finally. "More than just new mother tired. Have you been feeling unwell?" She hesitated. "A bit queasy in the mornings, but it passes. I assumed it was just exhaustion from caring for 4 little ones." "Hum." His expression grew thoughtful. "Any other symptoms? Tenderness? Changes in your monthly cycle?" Gabriella blushed slightly. "Yes, actually. I'm late, but I thought that was also due to fatigue, and with my condition." Dr. Morrison set down his cup. "Would you allow me to examine you?" Heart racing, Gabriella nodded. They went to her bedroom, where the doctor performed a brief examination. "Well, my dear," he said afterward, his voice gentle but excited, "it appears the impossible has happened. You're with child." Gabriella stared at him, unable to process his words. "That can't be. You said—" "I said you were unlikely to conceive based on your medical history. But nature has a way of surprising us." He patted her hand. "I'd estimate you're about 2 months along." "A baby. My own baby." Tears filled her eyes. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without more extensive examination. All the signs are there." After the doctor left, promising to return in a few weeks to check on her, Gabriella sat in the rocking chair by the twins' cradles, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. A baby. Her and Zachariah's child growing inside her, the miracle she had never dared hope for. When Zachariah and Thomas returned late that afternoon, she waited until the children were occupied before taking her husband aside. "Something happened today," she began, her voice trembling. Alarm crossed his face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm more than all right." She took his hands in hers. "Dr. Morrison came by and he examined me because I've been feeling strange lately. And, Zachariah, I'm pregnant." The words felt foreign on her tongue. "We're going to have a baby, our baby." His expression transformed from concern to shock to wonder. "But how?" "I thought so did I. But Dr. Morrison says it's true. Sometimes these things happen even when doctors think they can't." Zachariah pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might break. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Oh, Gabriella, this is—" He stopped, overcome with emotion. "I know," she said, her own tears flowing freely. "I can hardly believe it. Are you happy?" he asked, pulling back to look at her face. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Terrified too, but mostly happy." They stood together for a long moment, absorbing the news. Finally, Gabriella voiced the thought that had been circling in her mind. "5 children," she said with a shaky laugh. "We'll definitely need that bigger house." Zachariah's answering laugh was full of joy. 5 children, a ranch, and the most beautiful wife in California. I'm the richest man alive. The news of Gabriella's pregnancy spread quickly through the ranch and town. Most people reacted with genuine happiness for them, though there were a few raised eyebrows about the already large family growing even larger. Dr. Morrison monitored her condition closely, concerned because of her history. But as the pregnancy progressed normally, his worries eased. Gabriella bloomed in her condition, her happiness seeming to light her from within. The children reacted to the news with varying degrees of understanding. Thomas was excited about another baby, though he clearly didn't fully grasp what it meant. Sarah simply accepted it as she did most things, with solemn contemplation. The twins, still babies themselves, remained blissfully unaware. Christmas that year was especially joyous. The new house was partially completed, enough for them to hold a small celebration in what would become the main living room, though they were still living in the old house. With 4 children and another on the way, the space felt increasingly cramped, but Gabriella wouldn't have changed a thing. As winter deepened, Gabriella's pregnancy continued without complications. Her belly grew round and firm, the baby inside active and strong. Zachariah treated her with exquisite care, taking on more of the childcare duties and ensuring she rested as much as possible. "You don't have to hover so much," she teased him one evening as he insisted on bringing her tea. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass." "Humor me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "This is the first time I've been present for a pregnancy from the beginning. I want to experience every moment." His tenderness touched her deeply. Though he had embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly with their adopted children, there was something special about sharing this particular journey with him. In late January, a letter arrived from Mary Wilkins, now Mary Collins. She had given birth to a daughter and enclosed a photograph of the chubby-cheeked infant. She also accepted their invitation to visit in the spring, expressing both eagerness and nervousness about seeing Thomas again. February brought a spell of unusually mild weather, allowing work on the new house to progress more quickly than expected. Gabriella, now 6 months pregnant, spent hours planning the furnishings and decor, excited about creating a home that would accommodate their growing family. One afternoon, as she was sorting through linens to determine what they could use in the new house, she felt a particularly strong movement from the baby. Placing a hand on her belly, she smiled as another kick followed. "You're going to be as active as your brother, Thomas, aren't you?" She murmured. The thought struck her suddenly this baby, unlike the others, would be biologically hers and Zachariah's. Would that create a difference in how they felt about their children? The idea troubled her deeply. That evening, she confided her worry to Zachariah as they prepared for bed. "I've been thinking about the baby," she began, "about how this one is different from the others." Zachariah looked up from removing his boots. "Different how? This baby is ours biologically, I mean." She struggled to articulate her concern. "I'm worried that might change how we feel, how we treat all of them. What if we love this one differently because of that connection?" Zachariah considered her words carefully. "I don't think love works that way," he said finally. "When I look at Thomas, I don't think of him as my nephew, he's my son. When I hold Sarah or the twins, they're my children as much as if they came from us." "But this is different," Gabriella insisted. "I'm carrying this baby. My blood flows through its veins." "And so it will be special in that way," Zachariah acknowledged. "Just as Thomas is special for being our first, Sarah for being our daughter, the twins for coming to us together. Each child is unique, each relationship different, but the love, that's the same." His wisdom comforted her. "You're right, I'm being foolish." "Not foolish," he corrected gently. "Just a mother concerned for her children, all her children." As spring approached, Gabriella grew increasingly uncomfortable. The baby seemed determined to take up every available inch of space, pressing against her ribs and bladder with equal enthusiasm. Dr. Morrison assured her everything was progressing normally, but warned that first babies often arrived late. "Be patient," he advised. "Your body knows what to do." The new house was completed in early April, just as the wildflowers began blooming across the valleys. Moving day was a cheerful chaos, with Thomas helping by carrying his treasured possessions one at a time to his new room, the twins crawling underfoot, and Sarah solemnly inspecting each new space. Gabriella, now in her final month, directed operations from a comfortable chair, trying not to fret over details. The house was everything they had hoped for: spacious, practical, and built to accommodate their large family for years to come. A week after the move, Mary Collins arrived for her promised visit. She was a changed woman from the desperate girl who had brought Thomas to them 2 years earlier. Marriage and motherhood had given her confidence and purpose. Her daughter, Louisa, was a charming 7-month-old with her mother's dark curls. The meeting between Mary and Thomas was both awkward and touching. He had no memory of her, of course, but smiled at her as he did at most friendly adults. Mary, for her part, was clearly emotional at seeing him, though she maintained her composure. "He's grown so much," she said to Gabriella as they watched him play with Sarah, "and he seems happy." "He is," Gabriella assured her. "We've been blessed with him." Mary nodded, blinking back tears. "I made the right choice bringing him to you. I can see that now." During Mary's 3-day visit, she spent time with Thomas but was careful not to overwhelm him or disrupt his routine. She and Gabriella developed an unexpected friendship, bound by their shared love for the boy. "Will you tell him about me someday?" Mary asked on her final evening. "Yes, when he's old enough to understand," Gabriella promised. "We'll never hide the truth from him. He'll know you loved him enough to ensure he had the best home possible." Mary's departure the next morning was emotional but peaceful. She left knowing Thomas was thriving and with an open invitation to visit again. Watching her wagon disappear down the road, Gabriella felt a sense of completeness, as if another piece of their family story had fallen into place. 3 days later, in the quiet hours before dawn, Gabriella woke to a sharp pain across her abdomen. She lay still, waiting to see if it would come again. When it did, several minutes later, she gently shook Zachariah awake. "I think it's time," she whispered. The labor progressed steadily through the morning. The children were kept occupied by one of the ranch hands' wives, while Dr. Morrison, summoned by Zachariah, attended to Gabriella. By midday, the pains were coming regularly and intensely. "You're doing beautifully," the doctor encouraged her. "Everything is proceeding normally." Zachariah stayed by her side throughout, wiping her brow, offering water and murmuring words of love and support. His strength anchored her through the waves of pain. As the afternoon waned toward evening, the labor intensified. Gabriella, exhausted but determined, pushed with every contraction, focusing on the doctor's calm instructions. And then, with a final, tremendous effort, their child entered the world with a lusty cry. "A boy," Dr. Morrison announced joyfully. "A fine, healthy son." Tears streamed down Gabriella's face as the doctor placed the squirming, red-faced infant on her chest. She looked up at Zachariah, who was openly weeping, his hand trembling as he touched his son's tiny head. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "Just like his mother," Zachariah replied, his voice choked with emotion. "They named him William after Gabriella's father." As twilight deepened into night, the family gathered around the bed to meet their new brother. Thomas climbed up carefully, his eyes wide with wonder. Sarah stood on tiptoe, peering at the baby with solemn curiosity. Even the twins, held securely by Zachariah, leaned forward to see what all the excitement was about. "This is William," Gabriella told them. "Your new brother." Thomas reached out to touch the baby's hand. "He's little," he observed. "Yes, but he'll grow," Zachariah assured him. "Just like all of you." Looking around at her family, Zachariah, Thomas, Sarah, James, Joseph, and now little William, Gabriella felt a completeness that defied description. From the ashes of loss had risen this extraordinary life, this abundant love. Later, as the older children slept and Zachariah dozed in the chair beside her bed, Gabriella held William close, marveling at his perfect features. He was the child she had never expected to have, yet just one of the 5 who now filled her heart. She thought of all the twists and turns that had brought her here, the fire that destroyed her ranch, the diagnosis that had seemed to close the door on motherhood, the unexpected arrival of Thomas, the decision to adopt Sarah and the twins, and now the miracle of William's birth. "Life is full of surprises," she whispered to her sleeping son. "And sometimes the best ones come after the greatest sorrows." Outside, The stars shone brilliantly over the ranch, their home. Within these walls, 5 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge they were loved completely. And here, in this quiet room, Gabriella Garrison Isaacs, who had once believed she would never have children, cradled her newborn son and gave thanks for the unexpected joy of being a mother.